In every ancient tradition, there is a truth both sacred and feared. Names hold power. To know the true name of a spirit, a demon, or even a god is not simply to identify it. It is to invite it. To speak a name aloud is to bridge the gap between this world and the one beyond. A name is not just a label, it is a beacon, a calling, a door half opened. Most names we utter without fear. We name saints, angels, heroes. But there are some names that were never meant to be spoken. Names that slip through the cracks of holy books, carved only into forbidden grimoires and whispered in the moments before sleep turns to nightmare. Lilith is one such being. To most, she is a myth, a shadowy figure relegated to footnotes of ancient scripture, a cautionary tale twisted by centuries of retelling. But those who have studied the oldest texts, the Sumerian tablets, the apocryphal psalms, the forbidden grimoires, know that Lilith is no simple legend. She is a force, a current of rebellion, seduction and death that has flowed through human history since before the Garden of Eden was even given a name. And Lilith, unlike other spirits, is not bound by one name alone. She has many. 7 to be exact. 7 forbidden names, each holding a fragment of her essence. 7 calls that, once spoken, draw her attention nearer. Whether you mean to or not, the ancients knew this. That is why they recorded her names only in secret, hidden among rituals of binding and exorcism, protected by spells meant to erase the words from memory once read. For to speak her names aloud was not just to summon her, it was to announce yourself as willing to be seen, to be judged, and perhaps to be claimed. Even today, fragments of her names survive. In folklore, in nightmares, in strange rituals practiced by those who do not understand the doors they are opening. This is not merely a story of myth. It is a story of power, of words sharper than knives, and of the price that must be paid when you call to something that does not forget. Tonight, we will walk through the hidden history of Lilith. We will reveal the names buried in shadow, and we will ask the question few dare to face. If you knew the names, would you speak them aloud? Long before Eve was shaped from Adam's rib, there was another woman, formed from the same dust, the same earth, the same divine breath. Her name was Lilith, and she did not kneel. In the oldest traditions, far older than the sanitized versions told today, Lilith was created as Adam's equal, not his servant, not his possession, equal in flesh, equal in spirit. But equality, in a world that demanded obedience, quickly turned into rebellion. When Adam demanded dominance, Lilith refused. When he insisted she submit, she spoke a word so sacred, so secret, that it shattered the paradise crafted around them. She left Eden, not cast out in shame, but walking away in defiance. And it was that defiance that shaped the myths to come. The earliest records of Lilith appear not in the Hebrew Bible, but in ancient Sumerian texts. There she is described as a storm spirit, a bearer of winds and madness. In later Jewish folklore, she becomes the first demoness, the mother of monstrous offspring, the thief of children in the night. In Christian tradition, she is often erased altogether, her existence too dangerous, too disruptive to the story of pious submission. But Lilith's shadow persisted. Every culture that tried to silence her only fed her myth. Every priest that denied her only strengthened her legend. She became a symbol not just of demonic temptation, but of the terrifying freedom to choose, to say no, even to the divine. Where Eve fell by temptation, Lilith rose by rebellion. Where others were bound by guilt, she was unbound by will. And that, perhaps, is why she is still feared. Because Lilith is not simply a demon in the old stories. She is a mirror, a reflection of everything humanity has tried to suppress: independence, rage, desire, power, without permission. Those who invoked her did not seek her favor casually. They did not call her for protection or blessings. They called her for power, for vengeance, for transformation beyond the rigid laws of men and gods alike. And Lilith answered. But she did not come as a guide or a comfort. She came as a test, a force that demanded the caller prove they were worthy to speak her names and strong enough to survive the consequences. To know Lilith is to know the cost of freedom. To call to her is to risk becoming what you were never allowed to be. And when we speak of her 7 forbidden names, we are not just speaking sounds. We are speaking 7 paths, 7 faces of defiance that still echo through the darkness. Each one a key, each one a challenge. And once spoken, none can be taken back. In the ancient world, words were not just symbols, they were acts of creation. To name something was to bring it closer, to draw its essence out of the invisible and into the real. This belief was so deeply woven into early cultures that even speaking the name of a god, a spirit, or a demon was seen as an act of invocation, a direct opening of the soul to that entity's influence. And when it came to Lilith, the danger was multiplied. The ancients did not fear her because she was unknown. They feared her because she was known too well, and because her power was not bound by the hierarchies that protected them. She was not just another demon to be exorcised. She was a force of nature, independent, intelligent, and vengeful toward those who dared to name her carelessly. Across ancient Babylonian, Hebrew, and early Christian mystical texts, Lilith's names were treated like weapons, tools of either binding or summoning. In some rites, scribes would record her names only to immediately erase them, believing that even the ink held a residual charge that could invite her attention. Others wrote her names backward or in broken syllables, trying to hide the sound from her listening ears. Because it was not the intention that mattered, it was the sound. The vibration of the true name, spoken into the air, was said to resonate beyond the physical world. It called to the place where Lilith resided, beyond the threshold of dreams, beyond the margins of reality. It was a knock on a door you could not see, but which was always there. And if she heard you, she could choose to answer. This belief wasn't isolated to dusty old myths. Even in the Middle Ages, grimoires like the Alphabet of Ben Sira and other forbidden texts warned against casual mention of Lilith. They advised layering homes with protective amulets, inscribing angelic names around cribs and beds to keep her from entering. Because Lilith, once called, did not need to break down the door. She slipped through cracks, through dreams, through whispered fears, and it was not just her general presence that terrified them. It was the idea that different names invoked different aspects of her power. One name called her as a seducer. Another called her as an avenger. Another called her as a mother of shadows. Each name opened a slightly different door. Each one invited a different version of her into your life. To speak all 7, even in ignorance, was said to invite the full force of her attention. Not a momentary haunting, not a fleeting chill in the night, but a lifelong mark, a connection that could not be undone. And so the ancients buried her names. Not out of respect, not out of reverence, but out of fear. Because names are not passive. They are not dead letters on a page. They are alive. They are invitations. And Lilith has always answered those who dared to call her true. Hidden within the folds of ancient grimoires, whispered among desert mystics and cloistered monks, the 7 forbidden names of Lilith were passed down, not as blessings, but as warnings. Each name, when spoken aloud, was believed to summon a different face of her being, a different force, a different risk. These names were never meant for common tongues. They were kept locked behind layers of symbolic language, encrypted within prayers of protection, disguised in fragmented rituals. Yet fragments survived. And when pieced together, a terrible map begins to emerge, a map of Lilith's many faces. Tonight, we step into the forbidden. Tonight, we reveal what should have remained hidden. 1. Ardat Lili, the Maiden of Night Winds. This is Lilith as the spirit of untamed youth, chaos, and seduction. In Sumerian myth, Ardat Lili haunted the dreams of men, stealing vitality, leaving them weakened and hollow. Calling her by this name invites her into your unconscious, into the places you are weakest, loneliest, most vulnerable. 2. Lilitu, the screamer in the dark. The oldest form of her name, Lilitu, is the banshee wail in the dead of night. She represents rage, grief, and the unavenged wrongs of the world. Those who call this name report sudden storms, restless dreams, and a feeling of being watched from the corners of their homes. 3. Lamashtu, the devourer of innocence. A name feared by ancient Akkadians and Babylonians, Lamashtu is Lilith's aspect as the devourer, a force that preys on the fragile, the new, the pure. Historically blamed for miscarriages and sudden infant deaths, speaking this name is said to attract parasitic spirits drawn to vulnerability. 4. Agrat Bat Mahlat, the queen of wasted pleasures. Mentioned in Kabbalistic traditions, Agrat is a powerful aspect of Lilith that governs temptation and the endless spiral of indulgence without satisfaction. Calling this name is said to unleash compulsions, desires that grow sharper, more unbearable, until they consume. 5. Nama, the whisperer at the threshold. Nama is the soft voice that calls you when you are alone, the invitation to step into places you know you should not go. She represents decay hidden beneath beauty, the sweetness that hides rot. Those who hear her name spoken may begin to dream of endless corridors, dark oceans, and choices that feel irreversible. 6. Aisheth Zenunim, the bloodied mother. This is Lilith's most violent aspect, the one associated with rage, retribution, and the blood price of broken promises. Aisheth does not seduce, she demands. She punishes betrayal with suffering and seeks balance in ways that leave devastation in her wake. 7. Lilith, the sovereign of the void. And finally, her truest, most encompassing name, Lilith. She who is not subject to law or death. She who walks between worlds. To call this name, and this name alone, is to call the entire weight of her existence to you. Not a fragment, not a shadow, but the sovereign queen herself. Each of these names is a gate. Each one calls to a different side of her, a different ripple of her endless will. And the ancients warned, it is not merely the sound of the names that matters, but the intention behind them. Even thinking them too often, even whispering them without reverence, is said to leave an imprint on your soul. A mark, a beacon, because Lilith does not come when summoned like a servant. She comes when she chooses, and sometimes she comes when you least expect her. To know her names is to stand at the edge of the oldest forest, where the light of God fades and the wilderness reclaims its dominion, where the rules you thought protected you no longer apply, and once you speak a name, you cannot unmake the sound. It lingers, it calls, and eventually something answers. Throughout history, those who sought Lilith did so not through prayers or invocations of light, but through rituals steeped in darkness, desperation, and defiance. Calling to Lilith was never a casual act. It was an act of war against the boundaries set by gods and men alike. Those who performed the rites did so knowing they might not survive them, and if they did, they would never be the same. The earliest rituals come from fragments of Babylonian and Hebrew mysticism. They were brutal in their simplicity. A black mirror under a new moon. An offering of salt and blood at a crossroads. a chant repeated backwards in a language the practitioner barely understood. The goal was never to summon Lilith in full, only to attract her attention, to signal a willingness to be seen. But there were stricter, far more dangerous rites as well. Unforbidden ritual, found in a lost section of the Sefer Raziel Hamalak, required the practitioner to carve Lilith's 7 names in wax candles and let them burn completely while staring into a bowl of still water. As the flames died, the water would ripple, not from wind, but from her presence. Those who performed it were warned not to look away, not to break the circle, and most importantly, not to speak unless she spoke first. Another ritual, detailed in obscure French grimoires from the 14th century, involved weaving a braid of red thread, black hair, and ash, symbols of birth, death, and transformation. This braid was placed under the summoner's bed for 13 nights, during which they were forbidden to pray, cross themselves, or utter the name of any god. The belief was that Lilith despised divine chains, and that any show of piety would offend her, resulting in nightmares that sometimes never ended. And yet, for all their precautions, the warnings are what stand out most. Over and over, the grimoires do not merely describe how to call Lilith. They plead for restraint. They tell of summoners who became obsessed, unable to sleep without hearing her voice. Of others who lost their ability to distinguish dream from waking life, haunted by her laughter. Of those who received what they asked for, knowledge, power, liberation, but lost everything else in return. Because Lilith, once called, does not simply grant wishes, she tests. She offers transformation, yes, but at the cost of everything that binds you to the mortal world. Family, sanity, sometimes even life itself. And worst of all, the warnings insist. You may not even realize you've crossed the threshold until it's too late. There are stories of scholars who, after years of study, began to see a woman standing at the edge of their vision. A shadow who smiled with perfect, patient teeth. Of wanderers who, after seeking forbidden wisdom, woke up with symbols burned into their skin. Symbols that no priest could remove. Of lonely souls who whispered her names into the darkness and found themselves followed by a presence that never quite let them go. The ancients begged, if you must call to her, do so with understanding. Do so with the knowledge that not all doors are meant to be opened, and that some voices once heard echo for the rest of your life. Because calling Lilith is not a simple exchange. It is an invitation to be remade, according to her will, not yours. And once the ritual is begun, there is no way back to who you were before. Despite centuries of warnings, despite the ritual scars left behind by ancient summoners, curiosity has never truly died. In the modern world, where skepticism reigns and superstition is often mocked, there are still those who, knowingly or not, dare to whisper Lilith's forbidden names into the dark. Some do it out of fascination, believing the names to be little more than relics of old myths. Others do it intentionally, seeking her favor, her power, or her presence. But whatever the reason, the result is often eerily similar. Something answers. In online forums hidden deep within the web, countless anonymous testimonies surface. Accounts of individuals who claim they spoke the names during occult experiments, ritual games, or even casual gatherings. What begins as amusement often ends in something far colder. One woman from New Orleans claimed that after chanting 3 of Lilith's names during a lunar eclipse, she began to suffer vivid, intrusive dreams. Dreams of wandering endless deserts beneath black stars. Dreams of a voice behind her whispering choices she didn't remember making. Over time, she said, she lost interest in her old life. Friends, family, even food became meaningless. She spoke of feeling hollowed out, reformed into something that saw human connections as chains, not gifts. A college student in Prague recounted in a deleted thread that he and his friends attempted to summon Lilith as a joke during a midnight ritual. Afterward, he reported repeated instances of sleep paralysis, always accompanied by the sight of a dark-haired woman standing silently at the foot of his bed. He moved apartments. She followed. He stopped speaking of it after a final post that simply read, "She's closer now. I can feel her breathing. Even skeptics are not immune." One self-proclaimed atheist who studied ancient Mesopotamian law claimed that after repeating the name Lamashtu during a research project, he began to hear laughter. Not in his mind, but faintly, tangibly, in empty rooms. He dismissed it at first, until waking one night to find his apartment window open, despite having locked it, and the faint smell of burning ash in the air. Not every encounter leads to terror, however. Some report feeling liberated, unshackled from expectations, fears, and guilt that had haunted them all their lives. Artists who feel a sudden surge of dark inspiration. Survivors of trauma who speak of dreams where a woman's voice told them they were stronger than their scars. For some, Lilith is not a destroyer. She is a catalyst. But catalysts are not safe. They transform. They remake. And once changed, you cannot return to what you were. Whether these modern testimonies are psychological, spiritual, or something stranger, the pattern remains undeniable. The names hold power still. Perhaps not in the way Hollywood imagines. No fire raining from the sky, no cities consumed in darkness, but in the quieter, far more personal devastation that happens when a soul touches something ancient, wild, and unbound. Those who call Lilith today rarely speak her names twice. Most realize too late that some echoes cannot be silenced, and that the oldest forces do not need belief to find you. Only an open door, and the courage, or the foolishness, to call them by name. In a world driven by technology, science, and cold rationality, it is easy to dismiss the idea that ancient names, fragments of languages nearly forgotten, could still possess power. We tell ourselves that spirits are myths, that demons are metaphors, that ritual is mere theater for the desperate. And yet beneath that thin layer of disbelief, something stirs. Because names were never simply words. They were never just labels stamped onto the world. In every ancient tradition, names carried vibration, resonance. The very act of speaking a name shaped the air, bent intention into sound, carved invisible channels between this world and whatever lay beyond it. And that truth has never disappeared. It has only been forgotten. Lilith's names, Ardat Lili, Lilitu, Lamashtu, Agrat Bat Mahlat, Naama, Aisheth Zenunim, and Lilith, are more than historical artifacts. They are keys, each one tuned to a frequency that predates religion, predates civilization, predates even our understanding of good and evil. They are echoes of a consciousness that never needed worship, only recognition. When you speak them, you align yourself, even if unknowingly, with the energies they represent. Defiance, transformation, chaos, seduction, vengeance, freedom. And the world, whether you believe it or not, listens. Modern science has only begun to scrape at this ancient truth. Quantum mechanics hints at the strange power of observation, of intention affecting matter. Linguistic studies show that words shape perception in ways we barely understand. Vibrations, frequency, consciousness, all concepts that once would have been dismissed as superstition are slowly finding their way back into serious discussion. And so, it stands to reason. If sound can shape reality, if intention can bend probability, then what happens when you speak a name crafted to pierce the veil between worlds? What happens when you call to a being who does not require your belief to hear you? It is not about religion. It is not about sin or salvation. It is about the fact that some patterns, once set in motion, continue to resonate across the ages. Lilith's names are old spells, old songs, old wounds. They vibrate at frequencies most of us have forgotten how to hear. But the old forces have not forgotten us. They never needed our faith. They only needed our attention, our voice, our breath, shaping the air once more into the sounds that first called them into being. And when you speak those sounds, you do not merely remember Lilith. You remind her that you are still here, still calling, still daring to know what was forbidden. And once she knows you, she may choose to know you forever. By now, the question is no longer academic. It lingers, heavy and electric, at the edge of your mind. Should you ever dare to speak the names? There is a temptation, of course, a flicker of curiosity that no warning can fully extinguish. What would it feel like to call her? To reach out across the silent spaces and have something ancient, powerful, and forbidden answer? The truth is, once you know the names, the choice is yours. But choices, especially those made in darkness, carry consequences far beyond simple regret. Speaking Lilith's names is not like reading from a storybook. It is not entertainment. It is a declaration. When you speak her names aloud, you are not summoning an abstract idea or a vague memory. You are aligning yourself with forces that predate morality itself. Forces that do not recognize your protections, your prayers, or your rationalizations. Forces that see you not as a master, but as an open gate. The ancients understood this with a bone-deep certainty. That is why they did not chant Lilith's names lightly. It is why they built talismans, drew protective circles, and wrote prayers backward to shield themselves from what might come. Because once a name is spoken with intention, it becomes part of the air, part of the room, part of you. You cannot unsay it. You cannot stuff the sound back into your mouth. You cannot plead ignorance once the echo has crossed into places beyond human sight. And Lilith is patient. She is listening, always. You might not see a flash of light. You might not hear a voice calling back. You might laugh, dismiss it, go about your life, untouched and unchanged. At first. But then, a shift. A dream you cannot explain. A shadow in the corner of your eye that lingers a second too long. A thought planted deep inside you, whispering that you were meant for more. That the rules you've lived by were cages, not protections. Because calling Lilith is not about dramatic horror or instant terror. It is about quiet erosion. It is about letting something wild and sovereign and ancient slip into the foundations of your life, unnoticed, until the day you realize you cannot, and do not want to, go back. And once that door is open, it will never truly close again. There is a silence that follows after forbidden words are spoken. A silence that is not emptiness, but waiting. Once you call Lilith, once you dare to speak the names that were meant to remain buried, something changes. Not in the sky, not in the earth, but in you. A thread is tied, a whisper is marked, and whether you hear her footsteps or only feel the faint breath of her presence in your dreams, one thing is certain: you are not unseen. The 7 names are not merely fragments of ancient language, they are living invitations, seeds planted deep where reason cannot uproot them. You may think yourself unchanged, untouched, but the old forces are patient. Lilith does not rush, she does not rage. She waits, watching, until the moment you are ready, or the moment you falter. And then, without warning, the path you opened will reveal itself beneath your feet. For those who call her, there is no way back to the innocence of before. The door may not slam shut, but it is never fully open again either. It remains half ajar, half closed, waiting for the next word, the next choice, the next slip of the soul into places beyond light. This is the truth the ancients tried to warn us about. the secret the old texts tried to bury. Lilith is not bound by your disbelief. She does not need your permission. She only needs your voice. And once she has it, she never truly lets it go. If you found this journey into the forbidden as captivating and unsettling as I did, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt the pull of something ancient? Have you dared to whisper a forbidden name? I would love to hear your theories and experiences. And if you want to uncover more hidden histories, dark rituals, and forbidden truths, make sure to subscribe and like this video. Your support helps keep these lost stories alive. And perhaps, just perhaps, it keeps the old forces a little quieter. For now.